Restaurant Unstoppable. What the most successful restaurateurs know that you don't.
So, like, seeing that grind was pretty inspiring to me, to the level that they've hit. But also, the big one that I always say working for them, and the big lessons that I've learned from them were the importance of the front of the house. So many times chefs get locked into, it's all about the food. It's all about the food. You know, it's not. It's all about the experience overall.
Yeah, I want to dive into that, but first I just want to highlight real quick
Sure.
because, man, the grind and what they did for you, they inspired you. They showed you what's possible, and that's exactly what we're here to do for the rest of the industry of the world, is to show people, you know, what's possible. It's just so important, like, to lift people up around you, right?
Yeah.
In that moment, like, when reflecting back at who you were again when you got there and who you were when you left, like, they showed you the level of what's possible, but how did that change who you were?
So it was just like this confidence builder, and it kind of made the owning of a restaurant like a reality. Seemed like a pipe dream for so long, right? Like, I'm going to own a restaurant one day. Like, that's not an easy thing necessarily to accomplish, unless you obviously have the means and whatnot, but I do not. But it just made it seem obtainable.
Yeah.
Right?
It gave you you gave
Hope.
yourself permission.
Yeah.
To go for it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because at that point, like, you've elevated to the top. Like, there's nowhere else to go as far as, like, I think growing as professionally, as far as, like, within the industry, you're standing shoulder to shoulder with the best in the industry. Like, how do you graduate from that?
I mean, in our in our small seacoast region, for a very long time, you know, they were at the top, and they're still doing their thing, right? Like, let's not forget, they Arrows is gone, but they still have MC Perkins Go. They're still doing their thing. They're still, you know, they're still out there. Now, has a generation under them come up and equaled, right, their success? I don't know. But there's a lot of talented people in our area.
Got it.
But you can't forget, like, where it started. Do you know what I mean? For me, like, it's just part of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's part of the it has to be part of the culinary map. The contribution they made,
absolutely,
to the dining scene in Maine.
You're reminding me that I have to reach back out to them. I think I reached out to them, like, the first year I started the podcast.
Yeah,
because they were close by.
Yeah,
and I was on the seacoast. But you're putting them right back on my radar. I gotta try to get them back on the show again.
They're good guys. They're super interesting. They have great stories.
Yeah,
and, you know, they're incredibly well educated. They're just, I mean, they're good people. Like, now they're demanding, right? Don't get me wrong. Like, they were not the absolute easiest people to work for every day, but who is?
Exactly.
I'm sure I'm not.
Right.
But you know,
yeah,
it's not all, like, you know, it's not all butterflies.
I did cut you short. You did start getting into the front of house and how they taught you the significance of the front of house. Drop a nugget on us real quick, because I do want to make sure we leave time for you to talk about Otis and Jason Canty.
So it was just the importance of the front of the house, right? Like, they weren't two chef owners. They came up in kitchens. They were chefs. Eventually, when they opened Arrows and further success, and maybe even before Justin Walker, and even during it, you know, it was like, one of us is going to be in the kitchen, and then one of us is going to put on a suit and work in the front, and they would switch, right? I just feel that there are a lot of times where chef-owned restaurants, the front of the house is completely ignored.
Yeah,
I've always said great service will save a mediocre meal, but a great meal doesn't always save shitty service.
Yeah.
And what I mean is, there's places that I eat at even now where the food, it's not bad, but it's not like life-changing food experience. But, like, you walk in and they know you and they remember you and you talk to them and they just treat you really well, and it's warm and it's inviting, I'm going to go back. But I've also been to restaurants where, like, I had an amazing meal, and the service sucked. And I'm just like, I'm never going back there.
Right.
Because I don't want to deal with that.
I think people forget at the end of the day, it's just about relationships, you know?
Yeah.
Like, the food can be amazing, but like, once you've had it, like, that's okay, I've had it, you know? But, like, that person remembering me in my experience and having that, or reflecting on something we talked about, like, 5 months ago when I was here, and, like, just people giving an F, you know?
Exactly.
It's just so powerful.
It goes a long way. Like,
Absolutely.
it really does just go a long way.
So what did they do to elevate their service and to really
So,
put an emphasis
you know,
on it?
the way they right, Arrows was kind of on, like, that that other level, right? It was very, like, the White Barn Inn. I mean, we didn't do the, like, group serving, but it was just, right, like, even just watching the servers set up, you know, it was like, somebody would come in and all the copper was polished. The brass railings for the stairs were polished. Now, you're talking about a brass railing in a kitchen that no customer ever sees. But still, you know, like, the stairs were sprayed and wiped. Every table was cleaned. Like, the linen, you know, before service would start, this is when I was at Arrows, like, Clark and I would, you know, we would sit down with the staff and do the pre-meal shift, and, you know, so-and-so's coming in, it's their birthday, blah, blah. Someone else is coming in, they don't eat, they're allergic to shellfish. And then, you know, the servers would break off, and just it was the little things, you know. Yeah, uniforms were ironed, you know, like, servers were upstairs like, oh, my apron's wrinkly, I'm gonna go iron it, as opposed to, like, my apron's wrinkled, I don't give a shit.
So I think,
you know, and like, we would do a lap, and I always remember this, like, because prior to this, it's not like I didn't know Clark at all, but I was definitely closer with Mark because we worked hand in hand. Because I was at MC much longer than I was at Arrows. I was only at Arrows their last season, you know, which was, like, I think 28 seasons. And ironically enough, I'm only the second chef of that restaurant.
Okay.
Other than them.
Mm-hmm.
It was Mark and Clark, Justin Walker, and then me for 1 year. So think about that in that span, that it wasn't a high changeover, right? But I always remember this with Clark was we would do a lap. We would do pre-service. Servers would get up, finish setting up, get dressed, get ready. And then him and I would go, like, table to table. Like, you know, fork's out. This one's missing a fork. You know, blah, blah, blah. Change the napkin there. Then we would go outside and walk the perimeter of the outside, you know, and he, like, call a busser. Hey, can you sweep the walkway? It was just that level. It was the attention to detail. Like, would a guest, if we didn't sweep the walkway, would a guest have come in and been like, I'm never coming to Arrows again because when I came in, that brick walkway wasn't swept? No. But so why'd we do it?
Because it's your standard, not
exactly.
And that's the thing.
And that standard, they tried to not try. Well, I guess tried. And I don't mean that in a bad way. They tried to bring to MC, but instead of doing it, you know. So now you're like, the service at MC was obviously a little bit looser, but still try to mimic the things that are important in service that Arrows did. But now you're talking about a restaurant in Perkins Cove that's doing 400 covers. We're still clearing silver and resetting every, course and little things like that. Yeah, you know, and it was like, because that's what's important to them, and that's the experience they wanted to give. And they were like, even though this isn't Arrows and we're going to do, 385 people tonight in 4 hours, they still deserve a good level of service.
Yeah. So I got to unpackage this because I had a follow-up question, which you kind of answered. Yep. And it's like, okay, so clearly they have high standards. That's what's happening here. The question was going to be, how do they maintain those standards? And the words coming into my mind are Danny Meyer, constant gentle pressure, right? Having those standards, knowing that things are going to shift and things aren't going to always be perfect, but you have to kind of keep your hand on it. You have to keep pressure on it. You have to correct things when they're slightly off. Yep. And you have to let people know constantly what the standard is. And there's ways to recreate yourself in those standard, instead of I mean, you can walk around, but you can also create checklists. You can do these things to say this is the standard, and you can recreate your walk around and show people this is all the stuff you should be looking at when you're doing your pre-meal or whatever. Did you guys have that kind of stuff too?
We did. I mean, there were definitely checklists, both at MC and Arrows. A lot of time they were like a laminated checklist that had like a dry erase marker, and like if a server came in and did something, they checked it off, and then the next. So yes, but there was also like, look, not every day, right? They had their moments, but there were a lot of times where like they weren't afraid to do it too. Like there were nights where
leadership.
Yeah, like there were nights where I watched Mark push racks of dishes through, and he used to joke, and he'd be in the pit, we'd be packed, and he'd be in the dish pit, like highest paid dishwasher in Maine. You know what I mean? Like joking around because he's like, like, or he'd look at you, and I do it too now. I joke around, and I'm like, you're like running rack after rack, and you're like, so you want to own a restaurant, huh? Like it's super glamorous, you know what I mean? But they would do it. There were not, like busy nights at Arrows where, maybe they were short staffed, and Clark wasn't afraid to like grab silverware and start polishing and stuff like that, or if at MC, if Mark and Clark happened to be there on a night and Raw Bar got really busy, like they didn't just stand there and watch like some, foreign exchange worker who really didn't have a lot of experience opening oysters just go down like a sack of hammers, They would jump in and pop oysters. And I think that goes a long way with your staff. I think there's so many little things you can do that seem so insignificant.
Yeah.
Like anytime we broke 350 not every time, but at MC, it normally meant, right, the staff was working hard, kitchen in front of the house, was working pretty cohesively in order to be able to turn tables to get everyone in, and they would order pizza.
Nice.
Now, does pizza fix the like ass kicking you just took? No. But it really is just this like small little moment where we made it, we survived, we're all downstairs, let's like laugh, have a slice of pizza, and then go back upstairs and clean. But you know what I mean?
But
like
what you're describing is the difference between go do that and come with me.
Yeah.
And come with me goes so much further.
Totally.
And little things, what is a couple pies, maybe $60 max, right? But what does that say?
Yeah, and it's like
what can it might only be a dollar amount, $60, but the value in that is so much more.
And I think it's to the right people. Like there were definitely nights where like I would be that would happen, and I would go downstairs, and you would hear like one or two employees being like, I just had like 30 tables, and I got yelled at for this, and I'm like one slice of pepperoni pizza is supposed to make me feel better, and you're like. No, not really, but like we all went through it.
Yeah.
Like the pizza it's not like, the grandma trying to buy your love. It was a very small token of recognition, like, thank you for working hard tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that's another one.
Yeah.
Like, do you know how many people leave work without anybody looking at them and just going, hey, thanks, man, good job tonight? That's it.
It's so important.
I know as a line cook, now that didn't fix all my problems, but like there were definitely nights where like you had a hard night, but you got through it. People were happy. And when you left, the chef would go, hey, hey Lee, good job tonight. Thanks. See you tomorrow. And there was it's not, for lack of a better expression, it's almost like this instant relief, like, oh, okay, it's going to be okay.
I can't remember where I heard this. It might have been Pat Susi when I worked with him real quick at the farm table or whatever. I can't remember exactly. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, Applecrest. Thank you.
Love Pat Susi.
Yeah, he's the man. But I saw that in him when I worked with him. He made it a point to say thank you and good night to everybody that left. Like their name, Bobby, good night, thank you. And to see people to say their name and to thank them takes literally a breath to do that.
But it goes a long way.
It goes so far. It's
and
so
that's
powerful.
I feel like that was kind of the pizza.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Now, they still did say, thank you, good night. You know what I mean? Mark was a notorious hugger, and he loves, he takes a very long time to like say goodbye in a room because he wants to say goodbye to everyone. But like, I just feel like, like that, like you just said, right? The knowing your name and saying thank you at event of night, it goes a long way. That was the pizza.
Exactly.
Little things like that really stuck with me. The importance of the front of the house, the importance of breaking down that like front versus back was definitely ingrained in me there as well.